My name is Angelo Lopez. I am the editorial cartoonist for the Philippine News Today, a Filipino-American community newspaper in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm speaking to a fellow Californian, Steve Greenberg, who's in the LA area. He does cartoons for the Crooked Media, or no, not Crooked Media, but Crooks, crooksandliars.com, and various Jewish journals in the California area. He contributes to the cartoon movement that's in the Netherlands. And I guess you were the first American cartoonist to join that group, right?
Yeah, they reached out to me, so I was the first American they invited to this. So that was really flattering.
Congratulations. And you also do a comic strip, Boomerish, which has been self-syndicated for, I guess, 10 years.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much and stuff. I guess from 2009 to 2019, you also did cartoons for an alt weekly in Ventura County.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for being a friend and stuff. I think, you were the very first cartoonist I met in any of the conventions and stuff. I went out of the elevator, I think the Portland convention, and there you were. So you're the very first editorial cartoonist I ever met.
Yeah. Well, I remember my very first convention, not knowing anybody and hoping that somebody would reach out to me. So paying it forward. Saw an unfamiliar cartoonist and reach out and say, hey, hi, what's your name? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for being so friendly and stuff. So thank you. Well, these past 2 years, it's been kind of crazy. How have you been?
It's been intense. It's been a couple intense years, for the world and for myself. Personally, I got laid off from my full-time job. My full-time job is laying out newspapers, suburban newspaper pages. I was working for a division of the Los Angeles Times, and the pandemic took down newspaper revenue, and they laid off my little division entirely. So that was a huge disruptor. And I did find work doing similar work a year ago. So I'm back doing that same kind of work. But my freelance cartooning has taken a hit because so many publications have been impacted by the pandemic. Their advertising went away and their expenses went up, and many publications folded. Many went online only. Many cut back their budgets, and that took a huge part of my freelancing. So, I fortunately have not contracted COVID, so I'm really grateful that I've kept healthy. So I haven't had that direct impact, but it's affected me.
Yeah.
I know a number of people who've had COVID directly. So
yeah, I have, but it was only mild because I got vaccinated, and then soon after, maybe a month or maybe 2 months later, I got it and stuff. But since I got vaccinated, it wasn't that bad and stuff. So me and my wife got it worse than I did. Yeah, you remember Lisa, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I'm very grateful. In your local community, how has that been affected?
Well, Los Angeles was one of the epicenters at one point. The epicenter of the virus has just continually changed. At one time, the San Francisco Bay Area was the hard hit area, and then New York City, and then LA, and then the blue state areas were more compliant about masking and social distancing, and then various other places such as Arizona and Texas and Florida, then they had the spikes. So LA at one point was the worst of the worst, but they improved, as the pandemic went on.
Oh, okay. Well, I know you have some comics prepared and stuff. So if you'd like to share a few and then start talking about it a little bit, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, let me share the screen here. This is a cartoon that's pertinent to both of our communities. This is a cartoon about anti-Asian hate. I live in the community of Torrance in Los Angeles County, and there were incidents right in my city of harassment or even physical assaults on Asians. So being Jewish myself, I've been highly aware of anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic hate, attacks, that environment. So there's a lot of sympathy of seeing another group go through that wasn't as much of a target in recent years until the pandemic.
Oh, so has anti-Jewish violence also risen a lot in the LA area?
There have been incidents. There have been some really disturbing incidents. About, I'm not sure, a year ago, the fighting between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip, the political ripples of that got a group of Palestinians in the Southern California area, to drive into Beverly Hills, find what looked like Jewish people sitting in an outdoor restaurant, and physically start attacking them.
Geez.
So, and these people had trucks with flags, Free Palestine and Jihad, and various other things. And their comments were not just anti-Israel, which should have been their focus if they were going to be taking that sort of stance, but they were segueing into anti-Jewish sentiments and making comments about Jews. They should have gone to the ovens, they should have been exterminated by Hitler, etc. So that kind of stuff has picked up a lot. I think the administration of Donald Trump and his personal actions and goadings had a lot to do with increasing the hate against a lot of groups, Asians, particularly with the coronavirus.
Yeah. Well, as an Asian American, I greatly appreciate your cartoons. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it when other people, and I try to do cartoons that attack anti-Jewish sentiment too. So thank you very much for being a good ally and stuff. But, I noticed with Trump, with the for him, it's, I guess, because of his stoking white nationalism, right? That.
Yeah, it appeals to his base. He does everything to appeal to his base, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, I feel really bad. I feel really bad. But one of the things I read in a paper was that anti-Semitism is sort of a canary in the coal mine. That usually when there's discrimination against various groups, anti-Semitism is the very first signs of that, right?
Yeah, that's been typical. It's been very true the last couple of years. Big spike in anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, those sentiments. A lot of neo-Nazi types have been feeling more comfortable since the Trump administration. Social media has brought out a lot of hate groups. In fact, I did bring up some cartoons that, let's see. Here's a cartoon, Hate Platforms.
Yeah.
This one, I drew in a couple of forms. One is this one is sort of like a neo-Nazi type, straddling the different social media platforms. I also had one where the right half was dressed in a Hawaiian shirt, more like some of the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, Boogaloo Boys, those particular variations of hate groups. But this was just sort of showing how the use of social media has really given them a lot more of a platform to get their hatred out there.
Yeah, I like how insightful it is and stuff, because I know in the Philippines, social media has been a problem. Trolls have been attacking people who dissent against Duterte, and now they're attacking anybody who criticizes Marcos and stuff. And in the Philippines, there's a do you know Bongbong Marcos? He's the son of Ferdinand Marcos, and right
Right.
now
Yeah.
he's leading in the polls. And one of the reasons he's leading in the polls is that a younger generation of Filipinos never learned about how bad martial law was, and so the Marcos family has been using social media and stuff to as a way of fooling the younger generations into thinking that Marcos was actually a good president dictator.
I've been following your cartoons on that, and you've been doing some great work, great enlightenment about the dangers of the new generation of.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping some of the younger people to read it and stuff. Now, one of the things in my life personally and stuff, I'm liberal, but I used to have a lot of conservative friends. But I've noticed over the years, I've lost a lot of those friendships, and it's been painful. And I think one of the things that's happened is a lot of them have gotten into these bubbles and stuff, because a lot of those bubbles have been because they're in social media, and social media, tends to, I don't know the right word, to group people into these bubbles, where they only hear people who agree with them and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have any thought on can our partisan divide be bridged, with these, social media, acting as echo chambers for, whatever you want, whatever side you want to believe?
It's going to be a really, really tough road to get to that. We are in such extremely polarized states right now. There are alternate news sources, alternate realities, alternate social media presences. Back when I was a younger person, before the internet, before social media, most people got their news from the same sources. They got their news from the one or two big daily newspapers in their cities, and they got their news from generally three major news networks: ABC, NBC, CBS. The news anchors reached nationwide. Everybody saw Walter Cronkite. They saw Tom Brokaw. They saw Peter Jennings, these people. And we all sort of got the same facts and could perhaps have different reactions to them, but we'd be starting from the same point of reference.
Yeah.
Now that's all gone. A lot of people only watch Fox News or One American News or Newsmax or InfoWars, something like that. And those are so specifically, deliberately partisan and not trying to be fair or show the facts as they are. They're trying to show particular viewpoints. And so many people, they're only getting their information from one direction. And that's, I think it's been very, very harmful to America, to democracy, to civil discourse. And I really don't know how we get out of that. It may take some extreme outside event like an asteroid or Russians invading us or UFOs invading us or something like that to get us to come together. And that would probably only be for the duration of that particular stress event. Then we go back to our individual bubbles again.
Yeah. Did you see that Netflix TV show? There was this one TV show, or not TV show, but movie. I think it was with Leonardo DiCaprio, where this asteroid is.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I thought that was.
When you were describing that, I thought of that movie, and I thought, I don't know.
Yeah, that was a terrific movie. I enjoyed that greatly, and it had some really good points to be made.
Yeah, and yeah. Well, not even an asteroid can break that bubble. but that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. So, do you have another cartoon to show or?
I do. I have various cartoons. Let's see. I do a lot of environmental work. I've been doing environmental cartoons for decades. I think at one point in our Association of American Editorial Cartoonists, I was sort of considered the enviro guy.
You
I
were
did
the
a lot of
green
stuff.
cartoonist.
I did cartoons about, well, before it was called climate change, it was called global warming. And
Yeah.
I've been doing those cartoons since the 1990s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this one I did for the alternative weekly in Ventura County. It's called the Ventura County Reporter. And I particularly love this kind of cartoon where I can be nearly wordless. I really like to have visuals carry the cartoons. And if I can have few or no labels and just have a strong visual impact, that really makes me happy that I hit this kind of self goal for myself, trying to be as visual impact full as I can.
Well, I have to say this is a great image and stuff. It's one of those, I can, whenever I see a cartoon and I think, gosh, I wish I thought of this. I wish I thought of this idea and stuff. So, yeah. Now, can you tell me a little bit about your process and how you do your cartoons? So, like with this one, how did you, what do you read and stuff, or, and then do you do paper or do you now do stuff?
I actually work on paper with pens. I use markers like Uniball, Vision. I use these Tombow, Sakura, Micron Pigma pens. I sometimes will use a brush pen. This is a Faber-Castell brush pen. So I'm actually drawing pen and ink on paper. I use a light table to trace from my ballpoint pen sketch. And but that's half the process. When I have that inked work done, then I scan it on a flatbed scanner into my iMac, and I use Photoshop. And from that point on, I do the cleanup. I reposition things if necessary. I do lettering, coloring, any touch up, any special effects. That's pretty much all done in Photoshop, or sometimes Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator together. So I don't have physical originals that look like the finished art. I have scraps of paper that may have a finished drawing or may have random elements that I group together when I'm in Photoshop. And I've been working that way for, I guess at least 20 years.
Oh, okay. I like your lines. It's very clean and stuff. Is that why you use those pens?
Yeah, I just like the clean look. Sometimes I'm a little too tight for my own satisfaction. There's times where I wish I could be a little sketchier, but I like the boldness. I like the cleanness. And it just, to me, reads faster and better.
Oh, okay. Do you have a schedule? Like with me, I do research Monday and Tuesday. I try to start drawing Wednesday and Thursday, and I try to get it done by Friday and stuff. Do you have a similar schedule?
No, I don't. I haven't worked on a daily newspaper since 2008. My last daily newspaper was the Ventura County Star, which was the competitor to this alternative weekly that this cartoon on the screen right now was drawn for. So I had, set hours and, set duties and so on. I've been basically freelance as a cartoonist ever since then. And so I kind of set my own schedule. If I have a regular job, like my current job of laying out newspaper pages for suburban newspapers, that sets my daily schedule, and the cartooning gets done in the evening or maybe on the weekends. So
hold on. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to turn off my phone. Now say the last part again.
Um, yeah, I have my set schedule for doing my regular work, and then the cartooning gets done in the evenings or the weekends, or sometimes in the mornings if I have a late start. Um, and the number of cartoons I do per week is varied. Right now, I'm down to probably fewer clients than I've had in a very, very long time.
Wow.
So I might only do a couple cartoons a week. Um,
Isn't
when I
this
get
the
busier.
natural? You've been cartooning since 1978 and stuff. It's just been, something you've been seeing over the years and stuff.
Well, most of my career, I was on the staff of a daily newspaper.
Uh-huh.
Um, I wasn't, for the most part, a full-time editorial cartoonist. I was early in my career, but then to stay employed, I had to become a staff artist doing informational graphics, maps, charts, illustrations, whatever they needed, and cartooning as, just part of the job. So I've had that situation for most of my career, but the last daily newspaper I was on as a cartoonist, that ended in a layoff in 2008. And so basically being freelance ever since then, my schedule has changed. The number of cartoons I do per week varies depending what clients or what freelance, or sometimes I get special commissions. I just have learned to fit all that in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I remember when I met you and you came by our place one time and you were telling us stories about about various cartoonists you've met. So you've seen sort of the evolution of the at least the American editorial cartooning field and stuff,
Oh,
right?
definitely. Sure.
Yeah. I just, what do you see as its future? I mean, because every time I go to a convention, similar stories as you and stuff, where cartoonists are worried about losing their jobs or they get downsized or, this or that. Do you
Yeah,
think it'll still be the kind of place where you can get a full-time job, and earn a living, or will it become something that's more freelance like you're doing now?
it's going to become something more freelance. Um, there aren't very many staff full-time cartooning jobs left.
Mhm.
The people who have those jobs are typically around my age. I'm in my 60s,
Right.
and those people are retiring. Steve Sack in Minneapolis just retired about a week ago,
Yeah, yeah,
and he stayed employed full time on basically two newspapers his entire career, like 44 years.
yeah.
Um, um,
Is
David
he getting
Fitzsimmons,
replaced? Is there going to be a replacement for him or?
um, that hasn't been determined. I'd say it's
Mhm.
not terribly likely, but it hasn't been determined. In Tucson, Arizona, David Fitzsimmons has gone into semi-retirement. He's down to one cartoon and one column that he writes a week, and that
Wow.
was his choice to cut back. He's in his mid-60s. Um, Many people who could have been laid off already got laid off. Many newspapers that were going to downsize already did that. So the number of places that still have full-time staff cartoonists is pretty limited. In California, which is the most populous state, there are only two jobs. There's Jack Ullman at the Sacramento Bee and Steve Breen at the San Diego Union Tribune.
Oh, okay.
And when I was starting, there were many, many staff jobs. There were three in Los Angeles. San Francisco had at least two. Their staff cartoonists in Oakland, and at least two in San Diego, and various other cities. And so I don't see people, for the most part, having full-time staff jobs doing cartooning. I was at a conference. I've been asked to be a speaker on a number of occasions for the college press. So in Long Beach, back in March, I was asked to be a speaker. And
Oh,
so I told the students who were in my room for my session about editorial cartooning that this is the worst time ever to be an editorial cartoonist, and it's the best time ever to be an editorial cartoonist. It's the worst because these staff jobs have mostly gone away and there's just very few left. And attrition is going to take down most of them until there's hardly anybody left. But there's more diversity than ever. You know, when I started, it was nearly all male. There were 2 female cartoonists in the late 1970s. Nearly everybody was white. Nearly everybody was male. You know, there weren't exotic ethnics. You know, now there is a huge variety. There's a lot of female cartoonists. There are cartoonists of color, cartoonists of different sexual orientations, certainly political orientations. There are people who do multi-panel cartoons. They do long form. They do online only. They do web comics that are basically political cartoons and not being called political cartoons. There are people trying experimental things. There are people, including myself, who were doing animated editorial cartoons on occasion. So these things weren't in the picture 20 years ago, certainly not 40 years ago. So there's a lot more diversity. You can have an audience that's much greater than you had before. Like when I lost my my freelance situation with this Alternative Weekly, the cartoon that's on the screen right now was one of them. They were a circulation of only about 30,000. When I draw now for crooksandliars.com, I don't know how big their readership is. You know, it's a nationally seen website, probably even beyond America's borders. In the past, I might get an email about a cartoon. You know, they have comment areas online, and you know, I could get a dozen, I could get 30, I could get 60, I could get 150 comments. You know, so there's a lot more reach, and there's just a lot of different things going on. It is much harder to make a living, and so I think most people will have to have some other means of income. In my case, laying out newspaper pages, but people have all kinds of different things. People teach, people still do graphics, illustrations. They have other fields that have nothing to do with cartooning, and they might be accountants or lawyers or something entirely different.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, do you think it's just become more of a thing of passion? You know, if you're passionate about doing political cartoon, you should do it, but you don't expect the sort, unless they find a way of monetizing it and stuff, you don't expect that sort of full-time living at it and stuff. It's just something that you do on the side.
Yeah. Now, see, I came up at a point, you know, I came up in the late 1970s where the staff editorial cartoonist job was the norm. That's what one aspired to out of college, and that's what one, you know, did their career with. And it certainly has changed since that time, you know, with so many jobs disappearing, so many newspapers disappearing. So the expectations are something different. I feel very fortunate that I came up when I did, because I could see the older cartoonists, the ones who are getting ready to retire, who'd been doing this since the 1940s or whatever, you know, when there were 2, 3, even more newspapers in a city, it was competitive, you know, they would be a staff editorial cartoonist for the entire careers. You know, I feel very lucky that I came up when that was still a potential thing to get into. But, you know, in the last 10 years, 15 years, where that's changed so dramatically, you know, I don't know the motivation for the younger cartoonists. I was absolutely entranced by editorial cartooning when I was a college student. I went to Cal State Long Beach. I was entranced by cartooning. I was just completely smitten by doing it, and I never lost that passion myself. And I have kept cartooning where a lot of people gave up. They weren't making a living or whatever. They have family to support or whatever. And so a
Yeah.
lot of colleagues, they did it for a while and they just kind of threw in the towel.
Yeah.
Because I have most of my career not had the editorial cartooning being the primary source of my income. It was a secondary part of a staff job, for example,
Yeah.
or it's something I did besides laying out newspapers, something like that. I kept doing the cartooning largely out of passion and stubbornness. I'm pretty stubborn
We're
now.
glad that you're stubborn because you do
Yeah.
good cartoons.
But it's just been part of my makeup. It's part of my DNA to do this. And if I was a college student now, I don't know if I'd have that same kind of drive and passion. You and I have a young colleague, Alexandra Bowman, who is a student at I believe Georgetown University, and she's a very good young cartoonist. She's getting some great cartooning done, great exposure. She's drawing for the Lincoln Project and various other places. She's got the passion, and I'm thrilled to see a young person who may not have the same career path as say I did, have that drive and wanting to do this and doing a great job. So I'm really so thrilled to see, this kind of person show up. So I really appreciate, when somebody has the passion, just do it, because this is what, this is what drives me. This is why I keep doing it, even though the financial reward has become much, much less, because I love doing it. And it's what I do. It's me. It's my persona.
Yeah, that's why I do it too. I love it, but it pays for maybe a night at McDonald's for me.
That's where it's good to have a rich wife.
You're talking about your passion for cartooning. You came around at a time when Herb Block was still around, Conrad was still around. Who so that was a pretty rich time. McNally, he was around then too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who are your heroes? Who are your cartoonist heroes?
Well, Paul Conrad of the Los Angeles Times is a huge influence. I grew up in LA County, and so I read the LA Times every day. So Conrad had a lot to do with my getting shaped. He helped shape my visual vocabulary, my way of cartooning, to some degree the politics, I suppose. He was hugely influential. I was a big fan of Mad Magazine, so I loved all those cartoonists. Among editorial cartoonists, I really love the work of Don Wright, who was a cartoonist in Southern Florida, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner, absolutely outstanding cartoonist. One of the big influences among our colleagues was Tony Auth in the
Philadelphia, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Auth had a very simple looking style, almost childlike. In fact, it was so simply drawn. And he taught me that, you could make a lot to do with a lot less. You could draw, a square of some sort, and have it be a tabletop instead of, being drawing, wood texture and all the legs of the table with all the carving parts of it. Just draw a four-sided shape. Okay, that's a table. So I have little bits of influence of him. Like sometimes I'll just draw sort of a loop to be a nose. That's an Auth thing. Another cartoonist who's not as well known, who was a big influence on me and some other colleagues, particularly of my generation. He was an underground cartoonist for Los Angeles Free Press, Ron Cobb.
Yeah, I just
Cobb,
learned about him a few years ago, basically from I think David Brown. He was telling me about him.
yeah, Cobb was a fantastic, I mean, really fantastic editorial cartoonist, fantastic draftsman. He's much better known as a guy who worked on science fiction films like Star Wars. He was
Oh,
set designer, vehicle designer, character designer, costume designer. So, for example, the original
wow.
Star Wars movie, the Cantina scene, he created the look of the characters that populated that. He made a lot more money doing
Yeah.
Hollywood stuff, and he made almost no money drawing for a 1960s underground newspaper, which is why he didn't keep
Hence
it.
his career change, right?
Yeah, but he did amazingly good work. You know, anytime I look at his work nowadays, I'm still blown away by how good it was. And he was an influence on me. Our colleague David Horsey in Seattle, he has a clear influence of Ron Cobb. There's
Oh,
various other, I think Vic Roshkov in Canada was another one who was influenced by him. There's a lot of us who were influenced by seeing the work of Cobb. So these are some of my big influences. In more recent years, even though, for example, he wasn't in the picture when I started, Clay Bennett, um,
yeah.
he is a brilliant, I mean, just amazingly brilliant conceptual guy. And he comes up with concepts, particularly mostly non-visual, non-verbal.
Yeah.
And he just completely knocks my socks off regularly. And, you know, I've learned a lot from him, you know, how to approach a cartoon, how to distill things quickly and make an impact with, you know, a lot of visuals and minimal words. One of the things I got asked to do, I don't remember how long it's been now, 15 years or something like that, join the cartoon movement out of the Netherlands, drawing for an international cartooning forum. That really helped sharpen my skills to do things that weren't dependent on words. I got a
Yeah.
lot more visual, which is something I always aspired to, but I got more adept at doing visual stuff that could carry across different languages and different nationalities and just be seen for the visual impact. And that was a tool that helped sharpen me.
Yeah,
So
one of my flaws is I tend to put too many labels in my cartoons. It's something I have to break the habit of, you know. But
yeah, my
yeah.
cartoons either fall in the category of almost no words at all, or there's just a lot of labels.
Well, is it? I'm wondering though. I mean, you know, because you do comic strips as editorial cartoons and stuff. Do you find you can do more nuance in the comic strip as a because you're doing it for seniors, right? But do you find you can do more? You know, you can do a more complex idea in a comic strip as opposed to an editorial cartoon.
Um, Actually, not that much. The
Oh,
comic
okay.
strip I do a
Okay,
comic strip. It's
that
called,
kills that theory.
well, to some degree, the comic strip I do, which is called Boomerish, which
Yeah.
is a play on, you know, the boomer generation, you know, what, fudging your age, you know, I'm 40ish, I'm 50ish, I'm 60ish, I'm boomerish.
Oh,
That's where
okay.
the name came from. You know, sometimes I'll have 3 or 4 panels do a conventional comic strip setup and punchline, you know, like any comic strip would have. Sometimes I do, you know, a single panel on those. On my editorial cartooning, I've always had some cartoons that are multi-panel where it takes 4 panels to do the cartoon, or sometimes even more, sometimes 2 panels, whatever. And those probably allow maybe even a little bit more development of, you know, bringing the idea up. Because the comic strip has to be really quick, you know, person A speaks, person B responds, you know, person A says something, there's a pause, you know, person B says a punchline or something like that. You know, it's quicker hits. And editorial cartooning, you know, in some forms, you know, particularly if there's multiple panels, can have a lot more depth and a lot more content. I think that's one reason why long form editorial cartooning, even though it's not called editorial cartooning by the younger practitioners, sometimes very effective. There's Susie Cagle, for example, who's the daughter of our colleague Daryl Cagle. She does multi-panel cartoons, that carry a lot of journalistic quality to them. Where there's giving a lot of information. She's one example.
She's a Californian, right? Is she a Californian too, or?
I don't know where she currently lives, but she's from California because she was born in Southern California.
Okay.
There's other cartoonists, people who draw for the Nib. Matt Boers and his colleagues, a lot of them do multi-panel. Matt Boers, who's kind of given up doing editorial cartooning because of the financial lack of it being very viable for him. He did a lot of cartoons where 4 panels, sometimes 6 panels, and he'd tell wonderful little stories to make his political points. So there's a lot of excellent work done that way. I admire that. That's not something I frequently do, but I do appreciate that as a tool.
Yeah. No, I just recently discovered, well, not recently, a couple of years ago, I ran into a graphic novel of Joe Sacco, and I guess they're doing this thing called comics journalism. Do you think that's I don't really look at the Nib much, even though, but is the Nib have like comic journalism as well, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's the stuff that's a lot of people would categorize it as alternative or indie or whatever.
Yeah.
It's what a lot of the people who are, say, mid-30s and younger are doing. So a lot of it's online. So the Medium, the Nib, this kind of outlet, a lot of that is the long form. And, some of it's, I think, properly called comics journalism, where it's telling a story. It's telling a news story or telling the backstory of some environmental situation or some social justice situation. And it might take, it might be multiple pages. It might be like a very tiny graphic novel. But I see people doing wonderful work like that. Online, it can scroll endlessly. So, you're scrolling, page after page.
It's exciting work, right?
There's terrific work being done.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
They don't consider themselves editorial cartooning or editorial cartoonists, perhaps, because they probably see that term as something for people like me who do largely single panel, in a traditional format traditionally for newspapers. But it's, and I've told the Association of American Editorial Cartoonists, when they're trying to attract younger cartoonists, don't use the term editorial cartooning. Don't call it political cartooning. Call it commentary cartooning, because the common thread is making a commentary about some news story or environmental topic, social justice topic, racial topic, whatever. You're telling your story. You're telling your story with commentary. And I think that's a better catch-all term. I think that would tie the different generations together more.
Yeah, I've been thinking about something similar and stuff. I've been wanting to look at the Nib because I love Matt Boer's work, and it's just I think for me it's time. I've been so consumed with trying to catch up on news in the Philippines. I haven't had that much time, but I'm sad about him quitting and stuff because I love his work, but I have to take some time to look at the Nib and stuff, because when I look into conventions of some of the cartoonists from the Nib speak, and when I look at their work on slides, I keep thinking, gosh, this is great. It's just, how it is. You just don't have time to do everything in a day.
Yeah. Also, the alternative press has some great cartoonists. Jen Sorensen, the terrific cartoonist. She usually does 4 panels. I think her stuff is brilliant. It's very readable. It's funny. She does great work. Dan Perkins, who goes by the pen name Tom Tomorrow. This Modern World is the name of his feature. He does, sometimes 8 panels in his strip. And his stuff is brilliant. The guy who signs his name, Reuben Bowling, his feature's called Tom the Dancing Bug. His actual name is Ken Fisher. He does kind of free form, long form stuff that sometimes runs in alternative weeklies, sometimes mainstream, sometimes online only. He does brilliant stuff. He was a finalist for the Pulitzer. He was one of the people who could have, should have, would have won the Pulitzer.
And, he won the Her Block a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's doing a lot of experimental stuff, fun comic strip parodies, sometimes, several panels to make a little story. There's just great diverse stuff being done right now.
Yeah.
It may not be called political cartooning, might not be called, that, because it's not seen as what, the Herb Blocks and the Conrads did back in the day.
Yeah. Well, I remember what you said earlier about it being the best of times, it being the worst of times for political cartoons. And that's an example of like just wonderful stuff being made. But then some of the practitioners like Matt Morris have to figure out how to make a financial go of it. So he's doing some of the most creative work right now and stuff. But how do you earn a living out of it?
Yeah, it's hard. And, I feel for people who, they've bumped up against the hard realities. They've got a family to support. They got a mortgage to pay. A very talented cartoonist who preceded me at the Ventura County Star. His name is John Scherfius. Scherfius went from the small daily paper that I followed him at in Ventura County, just north of Los Angeles. He went to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, one of the premier newspapers in the country, as a staff cartoonist. He eventually left that. He went to cartoon in Boulder, Colorado. He finally gave up editorial cartooning because, it wasn't paying the bills enough for him. And terrific talent, another almost like Clay Bennett, just, great concepts that, oh God, I wish I thought of that. And it's sad to see, he gave that up because it wasn't financially lucrative. I mean, for me, cartooning has not been something that I could live on for a very long time. But I have found other means of making a living, usually with some sort of staff job. Originally it was doing informational graphics, which I'm quite good at, illustrations, maps, charts, whatever. More recently, it's been laying out newspaper pages for suburban weeklies. And, I'm very thankful for that work because it pays the bills and I can do the cartooning without, living or dying by that small income stream.
Yeah. I know you have other cartoons you want to share and stuff. So,
Okay.
So let me give you time to share it and we can still talk while you're sharing the cartoons.
Absolutely. Yeah. I pulled up some cartoons to share. So let's see, okay, here's a cartoon I did at the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I have Vladimir Putin in a Russian tank here with various bloodstains on it. This is just as hostilities were beginning. And he's on the road to Ukraine and the secondary road sign, "Road Smoothing" by Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, yeah.
I think Trump had a lot to do with enabling the situation. Some of Trump's defenders will say, well, Putin didn't invade while Trump was president, Well, yeah, he didn't have to. He had a—
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. He didn't have to do it.
He had a willing accomplice in the White House. He didn't need to. He didn't need to.
Didn't Trump blackmail Zelensky? What was that thing again?
The extortion, trying to—
The extortion thing, yeah.
Yeah, to dig up dirt on Hunter Biden and Trump trying to hold up military aid to Ukraine. But I want to ask a favor. And that led to an impeachment. That led to Trump's impeachment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that you're a big critic of Trump and stuff, but I also think that your cartoons are just you're very critical of authoritarianism and stuff, because that's basically, it seems, you link Trump's autocratic tendencies with Putin, with other figures like, Netanyahu and stuff. You know, I mean, I don't know how to ask this question, but I mean, what are your thoughts on authoritarianism today?
The world has always had this tug of war going on between democracies and autocratic regimes, and regimes change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, often for the worse. It wasn't that long ago that South Korea had an autocratic government. Now it's considered, a great democracy, but it wasn't that way,
30 years ago.
I mean, the Philippines certainly had a variety of political styles, with the Duterte being horrible, scary autocrat, and the younger Marcos coming up, to possibly be as bad or worse. The former Soviet Union, they were they're part of the Soviet Union for decades. They were part of a totalitarian network of states. And when the Soviet Union collapsed in the 1990s, in some cases, these became free states. They became democracies. So there's always been a struggle between democracy and dictatorships. Dictators have a lot more brutality, and their means are a lot harsher, and it's a much more difficult fight for democracies to survive that kind of onslaught. So we're seeing it play out in Ukraine right now. They're fighting an incredible fight with a lot of Western aid, but they're going up against a brutal, much more powerful armed force that means to dominate them. And I hope they can survive in Ukraine.
I'm curious about something. In the 50s, Herb Block and the Walt Kelly, the cartoonists of Pogo, they stood up to McCarthy, right? During the Watergate era, Herb Block and a lot of those great political cartoonists at the time, Conrad, they really, they stood up to they really put a light to Nixon and stuff. And when we go to these conventions, we meet cartoonists who are harassed, who are jailed. We hear about political cartoonists in other countries who are killed, right? So in America, because of the decline in newspapers and stuff, do you think, is our power mainly now in local affairs? Do you think we still have the power to stand, do we have the power that Herb Block did to stand up to autocracy?
Probably not, because in Herb Block's day, and this is something I kind of mentioned earlier in our talk, the mass media was a lot more cohesive. You had one or two dominant daily newspapers, and people got their news from the daily newspaper. They got their news from 3 or 4 major news networks. And so we spoke a lot more common voice and got common facts. And the appearance of somebody like a Herb Block could have a lot more influence when people relied on the daily newspaper. Now we're completely fragmented. There are so many news sources. Many of them are not accurate or reliable or impartial. So I don't see cartoonists having that kind of national impact. I think we all can contribute a little tiny bit, but I don't think we're going to have anybody have the same influence as, say, a Herb Block did at the Washington Post. Having said that, I think we're a lot more effective for our specific readerships. For example, I think you have a lot more impact in the Filipino press because you're speaking to a focused audience. When I or anybody draw for a local publication, we're drawing for a local weekly, for example, community newspaper, I think there's a lot more potential for impact because those readers are seeing that publication. They're getting their local news from generally one source. And so there's a lot more impact potential for a cartoon. If you're speaking the common language and people are getting the common facts, I think having a forum in that news outlet has a lot more impact than my drawing a cartoon about Trump or you drawing a cartoon about global warming or whatever.
Yeah.
I think there's different amount of impact we can have, particularly the more focused we get, the more local.
I'm always wondering if, like, for American political cartoonists, our power is more towards the mayor of our town or the city council, or you're hearing all of this stuff about school boards, right? That I'm wondering if I kind of think we still have an influence in that area and stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the more local we are, the more impact we have. The days of when a her block could really affect national policy with Nixon or Senator Joseph McCarthy, I think that era is gone. I don't think it's likely to come back. At least in terms of cartoonists having that kind of power, but to affect local planning commissions, local politicians, to find scandals going on at City Hall or state government, there's a lot more potential to have some impact.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm hoping your mayor is careful, or or your city council doesn't go on your bad side and stuff. So, yeah. So, well, you have another cartoon to share?
Yeah. Let's see. Another one of my national cartoons. It's kind of fun. This is about gun violence and the thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers again and again and again with National Rifle Association's campaign contributions, soaking funding for the politicians who have no other interest in standing up, against gun violence, because that's where they're getting their funding. So lather, rinse, repeat.
Yeah. I don't know. We're talking about influence and stuff. In your area, is gun control an issue, or?
In Los Angeles and in California, there's certainly a lot more willingness to address, try and do something about gun violence. In red states, I think there's a lot less effectiveness because, it's, people screaming, the Second Amendment is sacred, you don't take away our guns, whereas, in blue states, blue areas, there's a lot more seeing the impact of gun violence and wanting to do something about it. But, it's going to take a national effort, to limit guns in San Francisco might be one thing, but then they could easily pour over from Oakland, or they could pour over from Sacramento, or they could pour over from Nevada, or they could pour over from Arizona, whatever. It really kind of needs to be a national effort, because closing one window while the next window is open isn't the most effective means of having control.
Yeah, it's a good cartoon though. Another wonderful image.
Yeah. Let's see. One thing that I've done for this website that I'm drawing for primarily nowadays is I'm drawing for this website called crooksandliars.com, which is a snarky website, as its snarky name suggests. And
perfect place for a political cartoonist.
When I started drawing for them, and I was just desperate to find another forum because I had just lost my forum with an alternative weekly in Ventura County, and I wasn't finding another print forum. So I hit up, any outlet I could think of, print or online, and John Amato, who runs crooksandliars.com, expressed some interest. And so I started cartooning for him in 2020. And once I started drawing online, I realized, oh, I do have the ability to do something that's not print specific. I can do cartoons that are animated.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I called one up, and I just drew this, and let me see.
See if it works.
Let me see if it works on this. Okay, so if this works, you'll see an animation here. And
that's okay. It's also in the gallery that in my intro. So
okay, let me see if I can make it work on this Zoom call. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
So this was just done yesterday, basically.
Wow.
And then I have my signature panel to show at the end of it. So it's,
how do you do this? I see this once, and you did a wonderful one on gun control and stuff, where the United States turns into a gun. It's, how do you enjoy doing these, or?
I love them. There's some extra work, actually. I called up, let me show you the pen and ink work I did for this cartoon I just showed.
Okay.
This is my pen and ink work here. Let me zoom in a little bit. So this is what I drew. I drew outlines of figures that I knew were going to become silhouettes. I drew one building and then an overlay for an Old West front on a building, one sign that I would change a little bit, and eventually in Photoshop, I drew some foliage. And so this is the pen and ink work I did for it. But to get to the point where I'm doing this, this is layering. This is done in Photoshop, and each piece of it is a layer. So I drew basically two buildings. Let me bring it to the next building and pause it here. So two buildings, I made them overlap, and I did a fade in and fade out to get it to, this was the animation in this form. Sometimes I have figures moving. I do different techniques, but the ability to do something that's animated is something that I didn't have as an option in print. So these are fun. They take certainly more time. I can do my regular cartoon in maybe 4 hours. These take, 8 hours, something like that. And there's no extra money. I mean, the per hour pay on this is. So
your pay is not commensurate with your work.
No, I probably make
with
more
your
money
time.
per hour being a farm worker, picking lettuce. But this is fun, and it's something that most of our colleagues are not doing.
No, I think it's wonderful. You do, it's good stuff. Yeah.
Our colleague Ann Telness, who draws for the Washington Post, but not for the print newspaper. She draws for the website for the Washington Post. She does a mix of what I call static cartoons and animated cartoons, and she does actually usually simpler than mine. It might just be one figure in two poses. maybe the person in a pose, maybe the head opens up and something pops out of the skull and then pops back in. That might be the whole cartoon, and a word balloon coming and going. So she does quick, simple hits, but she's very good.
Does she use the same technique as you do, or?
It's basically, it's called GIF animation. So, if you see moving memes on Facebook or whatever, it's GIF animation. It doesn't have sound and music and things. Our colleague Mark Fiore in San Francisco,
I like his stuff. Yeah.
He does full scale, with music and sound and voiceovers and special effects. And these were formerly done in the program called Flash. I don't know what his current software is, but he takes a week to do these things, and very, very time.
But it's good. It's very good.
They're excellent. What I do is is much simpler. It can be done in Photoshop. It's just a series of drawings or layers of drawings. And so,
I didn't know Photoshop could do this. Wow.
yeah, basically, you can create layers and then you just visually turn on or turn off layers. And so something will appear and something will disappear. This is not the best example because the whole scene is one frame and I'm just fading between two frames. But some of my other cartoons, there's more animation where somebody's walking or something's actually moving, and I have to draw the pieces, like traditional animation, something moves a little bit across the frame, the vision, and the expression changes, their head turns, whatever, their arm goes up and down or whatever. And so I've done different forms of it. Anyhow, they get a nice reception. I've gotten some respect from our colleagues for doing these because only a few people are doing them. Steve Breen in San Diego does them once in a while. Kevin Gallagher in Baltimore does very, very, very good ones. Just beautifully done. He makes a lot more income off his cartooning that he can support the time to do these. But he does wonderful work.
He's sort of a throwback, because when I look at his work, I think Thomas Nast, that kind of cross-hatching. I love his work, but but the guy has a great pen technique.
He's a brilliant cartoon. I mean, his art and his ideas are both brilliant. He's the best cartoonist who hasn't formally won the Pulitzer Prize.
Oh, he's never won?
Industry.
Are you kidding?
He's never won it.
I didn't know
he's
that.
The one who should have won it, probably repeatedly, and he never has. And the weird, quirky politics of the Pulitzer prizes, I don't know if he will or not, but he is one of the best cartoonists in our generation, probably in the history of editorial cartooning. Actually, he's absolutely top notch, and
he's a nice guy. I met him, I think, in a few of the conventions. He's always friendly to me.
Very nice guy. Yeah, he's also a puppeteer, which I think that actually influenced his ability to make things move. In his animations, I think he knows a little bit about the techniques of making things move. When I was a kid, when I was first interested in cartoons, the things I was passionate about were comic books, comic strips, and cartoons on television and Disney movie cartoons. And, so some of those I saw things moving. And so I always had a little bit of a sense of how things, move, even if I never pursued that as a career opportunity. But, I like the idea of something moving and something happening from moving. One thing that I'm kind of known for is I'm one of the very few people who has done cartoons for the Jewish press over the years. And that's something I kind of fell into. It wasn't something I was actually seeking, except for an occasional reprint. In the Los Angeles area, there's one big weekly Jewish newspaper called the Jewish Journal. And I was drawing in the next county over in Ventura County for the Ventura County Star. And I'd occasionally do a cartoon about Israel or something like that. And I would send those cartoons to the Jewish Journal, see if I get a reprint. And so they ran my work. And then one day, the editor just said, okay, we've got a weekly spot for you. Give us something every week. And I said, well, I'm not drawing Jewish cartoons, that frequently. He said, just give us something. And this was a liberal editor. He became both publisher and editor. Anyhow, he just said, give us something. You're like the top Jewish cartoonist. We want to run your work. Just give us something. Jewish if you can. Something about Israel or Jewish holidays or Jewish traditions or anti-Semitism or something. And if you don't, then give us something. Just about current events. National or state or city or whatever. So I did it. And so I was drawing for about 20 years for the Jewish Journal in Los Angeles. The pandemic took down most of my cartooning for the Jewish press. And I was doing my cartoons and selling them to Jewish papers across the country. And the pandemic just wiped out a lot of those papers. Some folded entirely, sometimes after generations of being in print. They couldn't survive. Some went online only. The Jewish Journal went online only for a year, but when they came back, by this time the liberal publisher and editor had quit. He left to do something else, and he was succeeded by a conservative. And the conservative didn't care that much for my cartoons, partly because I was critical of things like critical of Benjamin Netanyahu. And if I did any cartoons that happened to be about Trump, he wasn't a Trump supporter, but he didn't want to rile up the part of his readership that did like Trump. So he didn't like me getting political particularly. So when he came back into print after a year of being online, he did not bring back the cartoons. And the income from that supported my doing the cartoons for other Jewish papers. So now I'm down to a trickle of that. But I did a lot of cartoons that had to do with Jewish or Israeli or Mideastern topics. So I was not a fan of the conservative Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. So in this cartoon here, his political party, Likud, was exploring a power sharing arrangement with the opposition party that was called Blue and White. And Netanyahu was just full of scandal and indictments. And so he was the rotten egg that was spoiling the dozen here.
Yeah. Steve, I had a question. You know how Clay Bennett, he's a liberal cartoonist in the red state. How has it been being a liberal Jewish cartoonist during the time of Netanyahu? In terms
hard.
of
It's a good question. It's been hard because the Jewish readership is very diverse. In Los Angeles, LA's got a liberal Jewish population, but it also has a big conservative, more Orthodox Jewish population. And those sides are in as much disagreement as any other part of the country. When I would, I had tremendous visibility in the Los Angeles Jewish community because of the cartoons in the Jewish Journal. And if I would meet somebody who was more Orthodox, they would give me this very mix of feelings. Like they gave me kudos for my work, my drawing skills, and they were clearly pained at my politics. Like, Steve, you're very talented, but couldn't you use your skills to say, something on this side of the political spectrum? And I know the publisher would have liked me to do more conservative cartoons, but I'm who I am, and you're who you are, and if I drew things that I couldn't stand behind politically, that just struck me as being kind of hypocritical. So it was an uneasy arrangement when the conservative editor took over from the liberal one. He basically got rid of the other liberal voices, and he kept my cartoons going for a while, mostly because there wasn't another good source of cartoons. If you could find anybody else's cartoon to run, he would, and you'd only find somebody else's cartoon once in a while. So, so I did the cartoons, and he wouldn't run all of them. Sometimes I'd do a cartoon that I thought made a good point, but politically it wasn't where he wanted to be. If I did something about anti-Semitism, that got much wider approval. So here's a cartoon, the eternal symbol of the Jewish people. And, I could run this,
whether you're liberal or conservative, that's something they can, all sides of the Jewish political spectrum can agree anti-Semitism's wrong, I guess.
Yeah. Netanyahu, one of the many things I didn't care about him was before his administration, Israeli government tried to reach out to both Democrats and Republicans in Washington, D.C. And Netanyahu basically picked sides. He picked the Republican side and threw all his eggs in that basket, so to speak. He didn't care if he appealed to Democrats, which I think made it much easier for the side of the Democratic Party that is anti-Israel to speak up and influence Democratic stances. And so pro-Israel
so like if there's
Democrats,
a void, they fill it, I guess.
Yeah, pro-Israel Democrats exist. There's some powerful voices. Adam Schiff, Kamala Harris. Those are some people, for example. But there's also a lot of anti-Israel voices in the Democratic Party who now have more sway than they did before. So,
do you sometimes feel like you're between a rock and a hard place?
Sometimes, yeah. The cartoons I draw for the Jewish press nowadays, a lot of them don't get run. I draw what I feel like drawing. If it has to do with politicians and politics, I know that some of the editors share my viewpoints and some don't, or they have readerships that might be more conservative or more orthodox. So I did this cartoon with Netanyahu. He basically hitched his wagon, literally drawn here, to the Republican Party and to Trump. And when Biden took the wheel, Netanyahu was going the wrong way and lost a lot of his potential influence.
I'm curious, with Netanyahu and stuff, didn't he ally with some right-wing autocrats too and stuff like Viktor Orban? And that never made sense to me and stuff. So
he's far more comfortable with autocrats than he ought to be. These autocrats are not friends of Jews. A lot of them are very anti-Semitic. For Netanyahu to be, at all sympathetic with people who are, sympathetic to anti-Semitism, for his political gain. Netanyahu he's like Trump. He is concerned about, saving his own bacon, his own political future. And that's why Israel had to go through 4 elections in a row before they finally managed to squeeze him out. The narrowest possible coalition of every stripe that didn't like Netanyahu, from Arabs to very conservative parties, they only had opposition to Netanyahu in common, but he was able to get pushed out. But of course, he's lurking in the background, much like the fellow in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, is lurking in the background, waiting for potential time to step back in the picture. So sometimes I've also done cartoons that are just light and funny, holiday cartoons, because those things always get old. So here's one I did long ago about Hanukkah.
Yeah, I like this one.
Yeah, I can see my drawing style has changed over the years. I was looser decades ago. I think this cartoon goes back to the 1990s, actually. So I can see I've gotten tighter and tighter.
Is it because you only do part on paper than part on the computer? Is that?
Yeah, I think the fact that I can edit things in Photoshop and I can tighten things up and fix my mistakes. I think that it has a part of it. I think part of it, I don't know, the amount of time I devote. I don't know. I don't have a good reason.
Okay, yeah.
I just got tighter in some ways. I think the drawing is better, but maybe less fun in some ways. So I'll show a few other non-Jewish cartoons.
Sure.
Speaking of Trump, this is one. The Republicans have just circled the wagons to protect him. This was true a couple years ago. This is true, with the January 6th investigations about the riot. So, sometimes, we use very literal terms, circling the wagons. So, okay, circling the wagons, let me actually draw that. And, the wagon, instead of, Indian arrows bouncing off the canvas, it's scales of justice bouncing off the canvas. and Trump.
Steve? Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I mentioned even though I'm liberal, I used to have conservative friends, right? But did you go through a similar experience and stuff where, you used to have conservative friends, but it during the Trump years, it became a lot more difficult?
Everything's so polarized. No, the conservative people in my life don't like my work. And I'm somewhat guilty of being in my own bubble, my own circle of people who, I agree with, because I find the politics of Trump and the Republican Party nowadays, the anti-democracy leanings, the anti-science, anti-medicine, I find those viewpoints are so offensive to me. I don't really want to associate with those people. And for example, on Facebook, some of the people who are still conservatives in my life are family members, they're cousins. And, I've, in one case, I actually had to unfriend a cousin because he was being so strident about his pro-Trump viewpoints, and during the attempted coup, the riot in Washington D.C. on January 6th, 2021, he bombarded my Facebook posts with pro-Trump propaganda, and I finally had to cut this cousin loose
That's more
from
like
my
harassment,
Facebook
though,
friends.
right? That's more like harassment in a way.
It was kind of harassment. I mean, this guy's got a brother who totally disagreed with his own brother. They're kind of estranged. But, I mean, this cousin and I, we still exchange pleasantries during the holidays. We still wish each other, happy Hanukkah or Passover or whatever. But I'm not sharing his political views on, I'm not letting him corrupt my Facebook pages anymore, because he was.
Yeah, I'm sorry you went through that and stuff.
Yeah, again, he's family, but that doesn't mean I have to let him hijack my postings anymore. And he did that for a while. So I can show you one more cartoon, then we can get back to off the share screen. So this is another cartoon I did about the Ukraine. This is where I kind of combine the current events with my longstanding interest in environmental topics, because the pain at the pump people are feeling in America, the Russian attack in Ukraine, and the climate catastrophe we're going through, they all have a common thread. In this case, I'm using the gas pump hose as the literal thread of fossil fuel dependency. So I like that I could sort of touch on more than one topic in a cartoon.
Yeah. This is almost a sort of it's just one panel, but as your eye flows through it and stuff, it's almost like a multi-panel cartoon.
Kind of, yeah, without the multiple panels.
Yeah.
So that's that's a bit of my work here. I guess when you edit this all together, you could probably show some more of my animations. Those are fun. I've done a number of those animations. Again, having the ability to do that online, it's another tool, another fun thing I can do. So that's some of what I do.
What do you see yourself doing in terms of finding more cartoon opportunities? Because you said that less and less papers, the pandemic wiped out a lot of the community newspapers that used to have your work, right?
Yeah, I'm struggling to find new clients. I did find a couple new clients in the last couple months. In fact, today, this very day, an alternative weekly in Columbus, Ohio, used one of my cartoons for the first time.
Oh, okay.
So
hey, congratulations.
So that's good. I do this comic strip for the older crowd, the senior publications. And so I actually picked up a new client for the first time. I lost several of those clients because of the pandemic, cutting revenue. Again, some of those publications went out of business, or they had to go online only, couldn't afford to pay for features. So I did get one new client of that, so, it's like 5 steps backward, 1 step forward. So I would still like to find more outlets for my cartooning. I would like to have more than just one main outlet, because if for any reason Crooks and Liars choose to discontinue my cartoons, I want to have a forum. And I want the forum to be something other than just what I put up on Facebook, or the AAEC website. I want to have some readership of some sort. So I would like to find other places to get my editorial cartoons out there.
Yeah, I think I'm similar because I'm in the Philippine news today and stuff, but that's it. If anything ever happened to that paper and stuff, and it's a good paper and stuff, but if anything ever happened to it, that's I would have to go through looking for another place too. Have you thought of the cartoon movement? Because you're in it right now, right?
Yeah. Well, when I started, there were maybe 50 cartoonists around the world, and it was much easier to make sales. I'd only be competing with, say, 50 cartoons coming in or 50 other cartoonists, and I could sell fairly frequently. And in the early days, I was one of their top selling cartoonists of any country.
Oh, wow.
But now they've got, I don't know, 500 cartoonists, 1,000 cartoonists, so by the time I post anything, 20 other cartoons have come up in the next 10 minutes, and it doesn't even appear on the feed anymore. So it's very rare. If I get one cartoon through a year now, I'm doing well, as opposed to, getting something on the forum, once a week.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate the forum, but it's gotten too big to actually be effective. I can't make the sales to them anymore.
There's just too many cartoons.
Yeah. I mean, again,
I'm in it too and stuff, but I haven't contributed in a while and stuff.
I mean, good work will always get picked, but if there's 500 people on a given day putting up 500 cartoons, and
how do you judge?
And 400 of those are about Russia invading Ukraine, your odds getting your cartoon about Russia invading Ukraine up there, that's not so good anymore.
Oh, okay.
So,
Well, I recently met a few Filipino cartoonists, and it's been wonderful and stuff. And they got to know me because of the cartoon movement. Have you met any Israeli cartoonists? I'm just curious.
I don't know them personally. I've had email conversations with a couple.
Oh, cool. How are they doing?
They're good. There's a very talented cartoonist who's also on Cartoon Movement, Shlomo Cohen, in Israel. He's a very good cartoonist, very good caricaturist and artist. We exchanged emails some years ago. I've never met him in person. In the Jewish newspapers, the person who gets most widely distributed does sort of a single panel, almost a comic gag cartoon called Dry Bones, Yaakov Pershin. And I think he's a New Yorker who became an Israeli citizen. Anyhow, he sells to most of the Jewish papers. So if they're not running my work, which is now the case most of the time, if they run any cartoons, it's probably going to be his. Or maybe there's a very local person, in some Jewish paper in, Detroit or Baltimore, name a city, who might want to do a cartoon as a hobby. But there's almost no market for that anymore. So it's something that I have done because of the lack of voices in this country to do anything about, Jewish topics. If there's a conflict between Israel and Hamas, for example, in the Gaza Strip, there's a lot of condemnation of Israel. Some of it's justified, much of it is not justified, or much of it is reflexive and doesn't understand what's behind the Israeli reprisals, that they were attacked, where Palestinians are targeting women and children, for example, specifically, and Israel is defending its territory. So there aren't very many voices that will try to explain the other side of that. So to some degree, I've felt that at least I can be a voice to say some of these things that aren't said, or to talk about anti-Semitism, for example, Trump's anti-Semitism and the Republican anti-Semitism, or the far left anti-Semitism. I've done cartoons on all those, and there aren't many voices doing that. So even though it's something that has become a lesser and lesser part of what I'm drawing nowadays, I still see the value of doing some of that, to have at least some kind of voice out there.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's good. Well, I mean, I don't want you to be staying up too late and stuff, so I don't want to do another Zoom thing. But do you have any last words? Like, what do you for you and stuff, and for American political cartooning and stuff? There's a convention coming up, right? It's in Columbus at that Billy Ireland Museum.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be in a position to go or not. I went the last time they held it in Columbus before the pandemic.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah,
How was it?
I enjoyed it. The editorial cartooning part of it was a small component of a more general cartooning festival. And, we touched upon this earlier in our talk, that, the traditional form of editorial cartooning, being on staff at a newspaper, you got a full-time staff job at a daily newspaper where you're drawing editorial cartoons as your primary job. Those jobs have pretty much gone away. There's just, maybe there's 24 left of those, and the attrition is taking those numbers down each year. So it's not a viable path forward. And some of the young cartoonists have come up, they don't see a path to make a living like they did in, say, the 1990s. Young cartoonists in college will come up and they'd be the next guy to get a staff job. That's not really happening now. But as I said also earlier, there's more diversity. There are online forums, there are niches, there are specialty publications, there are ethnic publications. There are forums out there, if one can find them, or create one's own forum. And the forms you can take, long form, animated, multi-panel, there's more diversity. There's a lot more female cartoonists, a lot more cartoonists of color. There's more opportunities, more potential exposure, more eyeballs that can see your work now than ever before.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for more than 40 years, and my skill level, I honestly feel, is better now than it ever was. I think my drawing ability is better than it ever was. I think my ability to encapsulate an idea in a visual form is better than it ever was. I feel that I'm still at the top of my game, being, in my upper 60s here. I feel at the top of my game. I intend to keep cartooning as long as I can have the visual acuity and hand-eye coordination and some place to be seen. I don't want to just draw, to show my neighbors or whatever. I want to be seen in some sort of forum, in print or online. I want to have some forum. And as long as I can, physically and mentally still do the cartoons and have people see them, I plan to draw this, keep drawing into my, 70s, 80s, 90s. Herb Block, I believe Herb Block made it into his 90s.
Yeah.
Al Hirschfeld wasn't a troll cartoonist.
Well, he was 100. Yeah, he was 100, right?
He was 100, yeah. Al Jaffe of Mad Magazine, who does some very good satirical stuff, some of it's sort of political cartooning. He's 100. Actually, I'm not sure if he hit 101 already. Wow. He hit 100, and he retired at 99. So one can still be really good and viable, later on in life, as long as you got, the eyesight and, hand-eye coordination, whatever. So I plan to keep doing this as long as I'm able.
Yeah, well, I saw a documentary of Hirschfeld. He was doing great stuff at 100, but he got leaner. His style got leaner and stuff. His early stuff was a little bit more, I love his early stuff, but his early stuff was more crosshatchy. His later stuff became more clean and stuff. But yeah, well, thank you very much. I thank you for your patience, and I thank you for all the insight you gave me, and also thank you for being a friend and stuff. I'm glad that you were the first person I met because you were so friendly and open, and you visited me a couple times, and I appreciate your friendship.
Yeah, well, I admire your skills and your work. I think you're an outstanding cartoonist and a good friend, and I've definitely enjoyed having this opportunity to talk with you.